If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales from the Wild West. Your support means everything to us. The sun hung low over the Wyoming Territory in the summer of 1873, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Cedar Creek. The small frontier town buzzed with the usual afternoon activity as merchants closed their shops and families gathered for supper. But this particular evening would prove different from any other. Sarah Mae Thompson stepped onto the wooden porch of her family's general store, her calico dress rustling softly in the warm breeze. At 19, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that made men tip their hats and women whisper behind their fans. Her auburn hair caught the golden light, and her green eyes sparkled with an intelligence that set her apart from other young women in town. As she swept dust from the porch steps, the thundering sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention toward the horizon. A lone rider emerged from the heat shimmer, his silhouette dark against the dying light. The stranger rode with the confident posture of a man who knew trouble and wasn't afraid to meet it head-on. The townspeople began to gather along the boardwalk, their voices dropping to hushed whispers. Word traveled fast in small towns, and everyone knew that solitary riders often brought news of danger. Sarah's father, Thomas Thompson, emerged from the store, his weathered hand resting instinctively on the rifle he kept behind the counter. The rider drew closer, and Sarah could make out more details. He sat tall in his saddle, wearing a black hat pulled low over his eyes and a dark coat that had seen better days. Twin holsters hung at his sides, and the way he carried himself suggested a man comfortable with violence. His horse, a magnificent black stallion, moved with the fluid grace of a predator. As the stranger approached the hitching post outside the saloon, Sarah felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. There was something magnetic about the way he moved, dangerous yet graceful, like a wolf stalking through tall grass. When he dismounted and turned toward the store, their eyes met across the dusty street. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. The stranger's eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and intense, holding secrets that Sarah couldn't begin to fathom. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, telling a story of violence survived. Yet beneath the hardened exterior, she glimpsed something else, something vulnerable that called to her heart. The stranger touched the brim of his hat in a polite gesture before turning and walking into the saloon. Sarah realized she had been holding her breath, and she exhaled slowly, her heart racing in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. Her father's voice broke through her reverie, sharp with concern. "Sarah Mae, get inside. That man's trouble. Mark my words." Thomas Thompson had survived 20 years on the frontier by recognizing danger when he saw it. The stranger's reputation had preceded him, whispered in the same breath as stories of lightning-fast draws and men who challenged him, never living to tell the tale. But Sarah couldn't shake the image of those storm-gray eyes from her mind. There had been something in his gaze, a loneliness that resonated with her own restless spirit. While other young women in Cedar Creek dreamed of settling down with local farmers or merchants, Sarah had always yearned for something more, something beyond the confines of small-town life. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, the conversation inevitably turned to the mysterious stranger. Sarah's younger brother, Timothy, peppered their father with questions about the man's identity, his eyes bright with the curiosity of youth. Their mother, Martha, worried about the effect such a dangerous presence might have on the town's peace. "His name is Jake Coulter," Thomas finally revealed, his voice grave. "Goes by the name Black Jake. He's wanted in 3 territories for various crimes, though they say he's never killed a man who didn't deserve it. Still, a man like that brings nothing but trouble wherever he goes." Sarah excused herself early, claiming exhaustion, but sleep remained elusive. She found herself standing by her bedroom window, gazing out at the saloon, where warm light spilled from the windows and the sound of piano music drifted on the night air. Somewhere in that building sat the man who had captured her imagination with a single glance. The next morning brought its usual routine of opening the store and serving customers, but Sarah found herself constantly glancing toward the saloon. It wasn't until late afternoon that she saw Jake Coulter again, this time walking purposefully toward the general store. Her heart began to race as she smoothed her apron and checked her appearance in the small mirror behind the counter. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and Sarah felt the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. Up close, Jake Coulter was even more imposing than she had imagined. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and hands that looked capable of both gentleness and violence. His dark hair was longer than fashionable, and his jaw was covered with several days' worth of stubble. "Ma'am," he said, touching his hat brim once again. His voice was deep and rough, like whiskey poured over gravel. "I'm looking for supplies, trail rations, ammunition, and whatever else a man might need for a long journey." Sarah forced herself to maintain her composure as she moved to gather the requested items. "How far are you planning to travel, Mr.?" She let the question hang in the air, hoping he would provide his name, though she already knew it. Coulter. Jake Coulter. He watched her carefully, as if expecting her to recoil at the name. When she didn't, something shifted in his expression, a slight softening around his eyes. "And I'm not sure how far I'll be going. Depends on how long it takes to outrun the past." There was something in his tone, a weariness that spoke of years spent looking over his shoulder, that touched Sarah's heart. She found herself wanting to ease his burden, to offer comfort to this wounded soul. "Sometimes the past has a way of catching up no matter how far we run," she said softly. "Maybe what we need isn't distance, but a reason to stop running." Jake studied her face intently, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You're not like other women I've met, Miss Thompson. Most would cross the street to avoid a man like me." He had learned her name by asking around town, though he didn't mention this. "I don't judge a person by their reputation, Mr. Coulter. I believe every soul deserves a chance at redemption." Sarah's words came from the heart, and she could see their impact in the way his shoulders seemed to relax slightly. As she wrapped his purchases, their fingers brushed briefly, and Sarah felt an electric shock run through her. Jake must have felt it too, because he pulled his hand back as if burned. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities and dangerous attractions. "I'll be leaving at first light," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "This town doesn't need the kind of trouble that follows me. And what if someone wanted you to stay?" The words escaped before Sarah could stop them, and she felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. But she didn't take them back. Jake's expression grew pained. "Then I'd tell them that a man like me doesn't deserve such kindness. I've done things, Miss Thompson, things that would make you turn away in horror. My hands are stained with blood, and my heart is as dark as the clothes I wear." Sarah stepped closer, her green eyes blazing with determination. "I don't believe that's true. I see something in you, Mr. Coulter, something good that's been buried under years of hardship. Everyone deserves love and forgiveness, even those who believe they're beyond redemption." The word love hung in the air between them like a promise and a threat. Jake's jaw tightened, and for a moment Sarah thought he might flee. Instead, he reached out and gently touched her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against her soft skin. "You're playing with fire, little dove," he whispered, "and I'm the kind of man who burns everything he touches." Before Sarah could respond, the bell above the door chimed again, and Thomas Thompson entered, his face thunderous with anger. "Sarah May, step away from that man this instant!" His hand rested on his gun, and tension filled the small space like smoke. Jake's transformation was immediate and chilling. The gentle man who had touched her cheek vanished, replaced by the dangerous gunfighter the West knew and feared. His hand moved to his holster with practiced ease, and his eyes became as cold as winter steel. "Mr. Thompson, I suggest you move that hand away from your weapon," Jake said, his voice deadly quiet. "I have no quarrel with you, but I won't be threatened in any man's presence." "You have no business with my daughter," Thomas replied, though his hand did move away from his gun. "She's an innocent girl who doesn't understand the kind of man you are." Sarah stepped between them, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "Papa, please, Mr. Coulter was just purchasing supplies." "There's no need for this confrontation." Jake's eyes never left Thomas as he placed money on the counter. "The lady's right. I was just conducting business." He gathered his supplies and headed for the door, but paused at the threshold. "Miss Thompson, thank you for your kindness. It's been enlightening." After he left, Sarah faced her father's wrath. Thomas forbade her from having any further contact with Jake Coulter, threatening to send her to live with relatives in Denver if she disobeyed. But Sarah had inherited her father's stubborn streak, and her heart had already made its choice. That evening, as the town settled into sleep, Sarah slipped out of her bedroom window and made her way to the stable behind the saloon. She had left a note for Jake, slipped to the bartender with a silver dollar and a plea for discretion. The note had been simple. "Meet me at the old oak tree by Miller's Creek. I have something to tell you." The night air was cool against her skin as she made her way through the shadows, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. The old oak tree stood silhouetted against the starlit sky, its massive trunk twisted by years of wind and weather. Sarah arrived first and waited, her ears straining for any sound of approach. Jake materialized from the darkness like a ghost, his footsteps silent on the soft earth. He wore no hat, and his dark hair caught the moonlight. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "If your father finds out—" "My father doesn't understand," Sarah replied, stepping closer. "He sees only the danger, not the man beneath. But I see you, Jake Coulter. I see the pain you carry, the loneliness that follows you like a shadow." Jake's facade cracked slightly, and she glimpsed the vulnerable man beneath the hardened exterior. "You don't know what you're talking about, Sarah. I've killed men, more than I can count. My hands are stained with blood that will never wash clean." "Tell me," she said simply. "Tell me about the blood on your hands. Help me understand." For a long moment, Jake stood silent, wrestling with demons only he could see. Then slowly, he began to speak. "I was 17 when I killed my first man. He was trying to rape my sister, and I put a bullet in his heart without hesitation. That was the beginning of my reputation." Sarah listened as Jake told her about his family's ranch, burned by outlaws who killed his parents and sister while he was away. He spoke of the years he spent tracking down the men responsible, of the justice he dispensed with his guns. Each killing had been justified, he insisted, but each had also taken a piece of his soul. "I became the thing I hunted," he said finally. "A killer who settled disputes with violence. Towns would hire me to clean out troublemakers, and I'd ride in like the angel of death. I told myself I was serving justice, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of the difference between justice and revenge." Sarah reached out and took his hands in hers, feeling the calluses and scars that told the story of his violent life. "You were protecting the innocent," she said softly. "That's not the same as being a cold-blooded killer." Jake pulled his hands away, his expression tortured. "You don't understand, Sarah. I liked it. The fear in men's eyes when they realized who I was. The power that came with my reputation. I became addicted to the violence, to the rush of being faster than the next man." "But you're not that man anymore," Sarah insisted. "I can see it in your eyes, in the way you carry yourself. You're tired of the killing, tired of the loneliness. You want something different." Jake's laugh was bitter. "What I want and what I can have are two different things. A man like me doesn't get to settle down, doesn't get to find love and peace. The past always catches up eventually." Sarah stepped closer, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Then maybe it's time to stop running from the past and start building a future. Maybe it's time to believe that redemption is possible. Jake's resistance crumbled as Sarah reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar that marked his jaw. "You're asking me to believe in something I've never had," he whispered. "Hope. I'm asking you to believe in us," Sarah replied, "in the possibility that love can heal even the deepest wounds." Jake's arms came around her then, pulling her close, as his lips found hers in a kiss that was desperate and hungry and full of years of loneliness. Sarah melted into his embrace, her heart soaring with the knowledge that she had reached the man beneath the gunfighter's mask. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Jake rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if trying to memorize the moment. "I should leave tomorrow," he said. "Staying will only bring you trouble." "Then we'll face the trouble together," Sarah replied. "I'm not afraid of your past, Jake. I'm afraid of a future without you in it." Jake pulled back to look at her, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. "You're asking me to change everything I am, everything I've become. I'm asking you to remember who you were before the pain changed you," Sarah said. "That young man who protected his sister, who sought justice for his family. That man is still inside you, buried under years of hurt and anger." Over the following weeks, Sarah and Jake met in secret, their relationship growing deeper with each stolen moment. Sarah began to see glimpses of the man Jake had been before tragedy shaped him into a killer. He was intelligent and well-read, with a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. He was also incredibly gentle with her, as if afraid she might break. Jake, in turn, was amazed by Sarah's strength and compassion. She listened to his stories without judgment, offered comfort when nightmares woke him, and slowly began to heal the wounds on his soul. For the first time in years, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved happiness, but their secret couldn't last forever. Thomas Thompson had noticed his daughter's changed behavior, the way she hummed while working, and the dreamy expression that often crossed her face. He began watching her more closely, and it didn't take long for him to discover the truth. The confrontation came one evening when Sarah returned from a meeting with Jake to find her father waiting in the parlor, his face grave with disappointment. "I know about your midnight meetings," he said quietly. "I know you've been seeing that killer." Sarah lifted her chin defiantly. "His name is Jake, Papa, and he's not the monster you think he is. He's a wanted man, Sarah May, a killer who's left a trail of bodies across 3 territories. What kind of future do you think you can have with someone like that?" "A future built on love and forgiveness," Sarah replied. "Jake has done terrible things, but he's not a terrible man. He's capable of change, of redemption." Thomas shook his head sadly. "You're naive, daughter. Men like Jake Coulter don't change. They bring death and destruction wherever they go. I won't let you throw your life away on a fantasy." The argument that followed was heated and painful, with both father and daughter saying things they would later regret. In the end, Thomas delivered an ultimatum. Sarah would end her relationship with Jake Coulter, or she would be sent to live with relatives in Denver, far from the gunfighter's influence. Sarah's heart broke as she realized she had to choose between her family and the man she loved. That night, she met Jake at their usual spot by the creek, tears streaming down her face as she told him about her father's ultimatum. Jake listened in silence, his expression growing more distant with each word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Your father's right," he said finally. "I'm poisoned, Sarah. Everything I touch turns to ash." "That's not true," Sarah protested. "You've brought light into my life, not darkness. You've shown me what it means to love someone completely." Jake's smile was sad and full of regret. "And you've shown me what it means to hope again. But hope is a luxury I can't afford. Men like me don't get happy endings." "We can make our own ending," Sarah pleaded. We can leave this place, start fresh somewhere else. I don't care about the danger, Jake. I care about you." Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if trying to memorize the feel of her against him. "I won't let you sacrifice your family for me," he whispered. "You belong here, with people who love you, not running from town to town with a wanted man." "I belong with you," Sarah said fiercely. "I love you, Jake Coulter. I love your strength, your pain, your courage. I love the man you are and the man you're becoming." Jake's composure finally cracked, and Sarah saw tears in his storm-grey eyes. "I love you too," he admitted. "More than I thought possible. That's why I have to let you go." They spent their last night together, talking until dawn, sharing dreams and fears and promises they both knew they might never be able to keep. When the sun rose, Jake kissed Sarah goodbye and walked away, leaving her heart shattered but her spirit unbroken. But love, Sarah discovered, was not so easily defeated. Over the following days, she found herself unable to accept Jake's sacrifice. She had seen the good in him, had watched him struggle to become a better man. She refused to believe that their love was doomed to failure. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She would not run away with Jake, but neither would she let him disappear from her life. Instead, she would prove to everyone, including Jake himself, that redemption was possible. She began by going to the sheriff, a man named Bill Harrison, who had known her family for years. Sarah told him about Jake's past, about the justice he had served, and the pain that had driven him to violence. She painted a picture of a man who had lost his way but was trying to find it again. Sheriff Harrison listened with growing interest. He had heard of Black Jake Coulter, of course, but he had also heard that the man had never killed anyone who didn't deserve it. "What are you asking me to do, Sarah?" he asked. "Give him a chance," Sarah replied. "Let him prove that he can be more than his reputation. This town needs a deputy, and Jake has the skills to keep the peace." It was a radical proposal, asking a wanted man to become a lawman. But Sheriff Harrison was nearing retirement, and he was tired of dealing with the rougher elements that drifted through Cedar Creek. Maybe it would take a dangerous man to keep other dangerous men in line. The idea met with fierce resistance from the town council, led by Thomas Thompson. But Sarah's passionate defense of Jake's character, combined with Sheriff Harrison's pragmatic arguments, eventually won the day. Jake Coulter would be given a chance to prove himself, but any misstep would result in his immediate arrest. When Jake learned of Sarah's plan, he was furious. "You've put yourself in danger," he told her. "If I fail, if I revert to my old ways, you'll be blamed for bringing me here." "You won't fail," Sarah said with quiet confidence. "I have faith in you, even if you don't have faith in yourself." Jake's first weeks as deputy were tense and difficult. The townspeople watched him with suspicion, and more than one man tested his resolve. But Jake surprised everyone, including himself, by handling each situation with restraint and wisdom rather than violence. When a group of drunken cowboys started trouble in the saloon, Jake diffused the situation with words instead of bullets. When a dispute arose over water rights between two ranchers, he mediated a fair solution. Slowly, grudgingly, the town began to accept that maybe Black Jake Coulter was capable of change. Sarah watched Jake's transformation with pride and joy. She saw him struggling daily to be the man she believed he could be, fighting against years of ingrained habits and responses. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, but Jake persevered, driven by his love for Sarah and his desire to be worthy of her faith. The real test came when a gang of outlaws rode into town, led by a man named Vance Murdoch, who had a personal grudge against Jake. Murdoch had been tracking Jake for months, seeking revenge for the death of his brother, one of the men Jake had killed years earlier. The confrontation took place in the middle of Main Street, with the entire town watching. Murdoch and his men had taken hostages, threatening to kill innocent people unless Jake faced them in a gunfight. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Would Jake Coulter revert to his old ways, or had he truly changed? Jake stood in the dusty street, his hands hanging loose at his sides, his expression calm despite the turmoil in his heart. Sarah watched from the store window, her heart breaking as she realized that Jake might have to choose between his principles and innocent lives. "I'm not the same man I was, Murdoch," Jake called out. "I don't want to kill you or your men. Let the hostages go, and we can settle this without bloodshed." Murdoch laughed harshly. "You killed my brother, Black Jake. I've ridden 1,000 miles to see you die, and I won't be cheated of my revenge by words." Jake's hand moved to his gun, but instead of drawing, he did something that shocked everyone present. He unbuckled his gun belt and let it fall to the ground. "I'm not going to draw on you, Murdoch. If you want to kill me, you'll have to shoot an unarmed man." The silence that followed was deafening. Murdoch stared at Jake in confusion, his own hand hovering over his gun. "Pick up your weapon, coward." "I'm not a coward," Jake replied quietly. "I'm just a man who's learned that there are things more important than pride or revenge. I'm choosing love over violence, hope over despair." Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she watched the man she loved make the ultimate sacrifice. Jake was willing to die rather than return to his old ways, and in that moment she knew that their love had truly changed him. But the story wasn't over yet. Sheriff Harrison, who had been watching from the shadows, chose that moment to act. With Jake's moral victory complete, the old lawman stepped forward with his deputy badge gleaming in the sun. "Murdoch, you and your men are under arrest for threatening innocent civilians," Harrison announced. "Deputy Coulter might not be willing to draw on you, but I am." The gang found themselves outnumbered and outgunned by the townspeople who had rallied to support their unlikely deputy. Murdoch's men, seeing their cause was lost, threw down their weapons. Murdoch himself, shamed by Jake's noble gesture, finally holstered his gun. As the dust settled, Sarah ran to Jake, throwing her arms around him as the town erupted in cheers. Jake had passed the ultimate test, proving that love could indeed conquer the darkest past. In the months that followed, Jake continued to serve as deputy, earning the respect and admiration of the community. He and Sarah were married in a ceremony that the entire town attended, their love story becoming legend in Cedar Creek. Years later, when people spoke of Black Jake Coulter, they remembered not the gunfighter he had been, but the man he became. They remembered how love had transformed a killer into a protector, how a young woman's faith had redeemed a lost soul. Sarah and Jake built a life together filled with love, laughter, and the kind of peace that comes from hard-won redemption. They raised children who grew up knowing that their father had once been a dangerous man, but that love had changed him into something better. The legend of their love spread throughout the West, inspiring others to believe in the power of forgiveness and the possibility of redemption. It became a story that mothers told their daughters, a reminder that love could conquer even the darkest heart. And in the end, that's what love is supposed to do: transform us, heal us, and make us better than we ever thought possible. Jake Coulter learned that lesson from a brave young woman who saw past his reputation to the man he could become. Sarah Thompson learned that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones where we help each other find our way home. What do you think was the most powerful moment in Jake's transformation? Was it when he chose to become a deputy, when he threw down his guns, or perhaps earlier, when he first opened his heart to Sarah?